Right, as we move to our next section, section 5.1.6, this section deals with solving equations for a variable. And there are many times in math and science where you'll be using formulas and equations to solve problems. When using these equations, you are not always given all the values for the variables on one side. In these situations, you will need to solve for the unknown variable. So to solve for a given variable, we use the undoing strategy. Remember, the undoing strategy is PEMDAS backwards. Whenever there's a fraction in the given equation, we're going to cross multiply. When there's a fraction equal to a fraction, cross multiply right away. If you have a fraction equal to a non-fraction, put a 1 under the non-fraction and then cross multiply. So, first example says the equation C equals 9/5 F minus 32 relates the temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, F in degrees Celsius C. What is F in terms of C? Solve for F basically. So basically, if we knew the temperature outside in Fahrenheit and we want to convert it to Celsius, we'd just put the Fahrenheit degree in here and convert. But what if we want to work backwards? What if we had the Celsius temperature and we want Fahrenheit? That's what we're going to do right now. So we're trying to get the F by itself. Again, we're doing PEMDAS backwards. So I cannot undo this subtraction because it's in the parentheses. So I'm going to undo this multiplication. And one of the things, remember we said, if you multiply by a fraction, to get rid of multiplication by a fraction, you can multiply by the reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply this side by 5/9, and I'll multiply this side by 5/9. And so that would give me 5/9 C equals F minus 32. And now, to get the F totally by itself, we can add 32. So that would give us our equation. F is by itself equals 5/9 C plus 32. And now F is by itself, and if we need a Celsius, we could just plug the Celsius temperature in there, and that would give us our Fahrenheit right away. All right, a couple other examples. Here we have the volume for a rectangular prism. Volume equals length times width times height. We want to solve for W. So remember, this is all separated by multiplication. So to undo multiplication, we divide. So we're dividing by every letter that is not what we want. We want to keep the W there. It means we're going to get rid of the L and the H. So I'm dividing by L and H on both sides. That would cancel the L and the H on the right hand side, leaving me with just W equals V divided by LH. The W is by itself now, and you are done. For example 3, we have A equals 1/2 base times height, which is the area for a triangle, and we are trying to solve for H. So a couple ways we could do this. First thing, I can multiply this side by 2, and the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2, so I'll multiply both sides by 2. So that would give me 2A equals 2 times 1/2 cancels, BH. And I want the H by itself, and the B and the H are separated by multiplication, so I'm dividing by B because I want the H by itself. So H is equal to 2A divided by B. Example 4, I'm trying to get the V by itself. So the V is right here. So I'm undoing anything added or subtracted to that V. So this negative 5t squared is being added, so I'm going to add 5t squared. So that would give me VT equals 5t squared plus h. And then the last thing I want to do, again, I want the v by itself, is I'm going to divide by t, because v and t are being multiplied together. So my final answer, the v would be by itself, will be 5t squared plus h all divided by t. All right, for this one, I now have a fraction. We go back up here, and it says whenever we have a fraction, we're going to cross multiply. So here we have a non-fraction on the left-hand side and a fraction on the right, so this is where we're going to put a 1 underneath the non-fraction. So I'm going to put a 1 underneath here, and cross multiply then. So remember, when you cross multiply, you multiply diagonally. So I'd have mv squared. You put your equal sign and then multiply diagonally the opposite way, 2e. I then want to get the v by itself. Again, as I go through PEMDAS backwards, there's no addition subtraction, but there is multiplication. So I'm going to divide by m. So that gives me v squared equals 2e divided by m. And then finally, I want to get rid of the squared, so I'll take the square root of both sides. So we end up with v equals plus or minus the square root of 2e divided by m. All right, for number 6, I'm going to solve for c here. And I want the fraction to equal the fraction, so I'm actually going to add this whole thing over to the other side so that I get the fraction equal to the fraction. So I would have 1 over c equals c over a squared minus b squared. And so now I have a fraction equal to a fraction where I can cross multiply. So I'm going to multiply diagonally this way, which is c times c squared equals, multiplying diagonally this way, 1 times a squared minus b squared. So I end up with c squared equals a squared minus b squared, and to undo the square, I would then take the square root. So I'd end up with c equals plus or minus the square root of a squared minus b squared. All right, so just remember PEMDAS backwards, and anytime you have a fraction, cross multiply.